Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversational Witchcraft with me, Dawn, the Kitchen Witch. I'm so excited today because we have Nathan Hall. And Nathan is awesome. He's a member of the Temple of Witchcraft, which, I am as well. Let me tell you a little bit about Nathan. Nathan is a witch, an animist, and an initiate of the Anderson Feri tradition. Like I said, he's also a member of the Temple of Witchcraft and serves on the board of the annual Mystic South Conference. He's also a contributor and editorial advisor to the Wild Hunt, which is a daily news source for Pagan community. He lives in Florida and can frequently be found connecting with nature on the trails and through the wetlands near his home. Nathan,
Hi,
welcome.
thank you so
Welcome.
much. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
And I'm honored to have you. And we did have a little bit of like back and forth with scheduling. So I'm glad we
Yeah,
finally made this happen.
yeah, me too.
And I'm so excited to chat with you because I don't think we've ever gotten the chance to chat like in person, even though we're
Oh,
both members of the temple.
right. Yeah, I don't think so. We may have overlapped at a Temple Fest in the past, but I'm not sure. You were saying that attending Temple Fest is hard for you, so
Yeah, it is. And for those of you that don't know, Temple Fest is this great event held by the Temple of Witchcraft. It's like a weekend long conference, and it's just spectacular. I've been able to go a couple of times,
mhm.
and I've been able to teach a couple of times. Um, but in recent years, the scheduling hasn't worked out for me.
Yeah,
So I'm excited. I'm excited for you guys this year, and I know you're going to
yeah,
be teaching classes there. So
yeah,
we'll
yeah,
talk about that a little bit more at the end. But
absolutely.
wow, so in your bio it says you're always walking through like the wetlands in Florida.
Yeah. So that's something that I do usually about twice a week, sometimes more if I can squeeze it in. My day job schedule is very kind of wiggly wobbly kind of thing, where the only days that I can really count on having off are Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Hmm.
So I tend to have a lot of because my kids in school and my wife works during the week.
Right.
Those tend to be like solo times for me that I can just go explore. And I've taken full advantage of that. Though I miss having weekends off. I wish I could get those back.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
yeah, I explore. Usually I stay pretty close to my house. There's a park that sort of is the northern edge of the Everglades. Um,
Wow.
and that's what I am usually going in and exploring.
When you think of the Everglades, most people who aren't from Florida or
Yeah,
near, those kinds of wetlands. And
yeah,
I have wetlands here in New Hampshire, and they're
right.
beautiful. They're like these little pockets of magic. They
Yeah,
just there's always ducks, and there's
yeah.
like just these beautiful plants, and but people don't think about, if you haven't experienced it, people don't think about the Everglades as being magical.
Oh yeah.
You
It
know what I
is
mean? We
hugely magical.
right, people think swamps,
Right,
alligators,
right, yeah,
places to put dead bodies.
right.
We're I'm
That's
kidding.
part of
Don't
the magic. That's
That's
part of the
part of
magic.
but
They just get absorbed and they're never seen
right.
again.
Right? Mosquitoes. Like that's the first
Right,
thing that comes to
right.
my mind when I think of the glades. But
Yeah.
can you just like share with us a little bit of like what to you of that type of land?
Yeah.
It screams magic to you.
So there's so much about it. Like even on a daily experience, I have in my regular walks, I have profound experiences with it. But one of the stories that I share, and I think that it's in my book, is when I went, it was early on in my time in Florida. I've been here for about 18 years now.
Mhm.
And um, early on, one of my friends was doing a sort of residency in the Everglades. She's an artist. And so she got to stay on the Everglades and create art that was inspired by her stay. It was from her residency. And so part of that was one weekend she said, come out and we'll go explore. You can do whatever you want. And I was just like I said, just sort of like getting my bearings in Florida,
Mhm.
trying to meet land spirits, trying to establish connections with a lot of the spirits that live and operate here. And so we went out early on one, like I think it was a Saturday morning before the sun rose,
Mm.
and drove out on an access road, sort of deep into the Everglades, and went to this lookout point. And the sun was rising, and it was about this time of year, maybe a little earlier. I think it was, if memory serves, it was a little cooler. So it was maybe May or late April. But um, just this like enormous orange sun rising over the grass, the grassy waters of the Everglades. And we were at this lookout point, and I just looked out, and I tried to connect to the spirit. I was just like, show me you're here, like
Yeah.
foolishly, I was like, show me you're here, like what out, and there was this moment where all of a sudden this like um I forget what it's called, like a murmuration. I don't know if they were swallows, but there was like a murmuration of birds that came up, and they started swooping through the air and creating all of these wild shapes. And it was right at that moment that I was like,
Oh,
show me you're
wow.
here. And then I had this sensation that from that, there was just this like arrow of energy that hit me full blast.
Wow.
And I was unshielded, unprotected. I was just like, give it to me. And it was like, here you go.
You asked for it.
Uh-huh. And I mean, I had like physical effects from
Sure.
that lasted for days and days beyond.
Wow.
The initial effect was that I got incredibly nauseous
Sure.
and sick.
Sure.
So, it was it was an ordeal. It was not like, let's have a nice little spirit experience. It was like full bore, like you asked for it, you got it. And man,
Right. Right.
so from that point on, I was, oh, I need to work on respect because this land is enormously powerful and it is incredibly old. Um, and that
Wow.
was the sensation that I got from the spirit contact. There were a lot of
Wow.
magical things that happened during that trip. We went into a cypress dome, which is, if you don't know, most of South Florida, especially, is on limestone, and there are
Hmm.
like pockets, where there's no limestone, and it gets filled in over, centuries with rotting vegetation, and it starts to create soil, and then cypress trees pop up, start growing in them, and it's called a dome because they fill in the depression, and the tallest
Wow.
trees are always sort of in the middle, and then they get shorter as you go towards the edges.
Because the roots are the deepest in the
Yeah,
middle.
right.
Wow.
Yeah, so it has more access to fresh water and nutrients and things that the trees on the edges of the dome don't have access to. So we walked out to, it was particularly dry at that time. Um, so we were able to walk out to the Cypress Dome, and it was just like it was the most enchanted place that I had ever visited. I felt like I was on another planet.
I mean, even as you're
Just
describing that, that sounds like being under this like umbrella
yeah,
canopy of nature, like hugging you. I'm
yeah,
visualizing what you're describing and it sounds
yeah,
otherworldly.
yeah. It
Wow.
was totally, and so there's a lot of bromeliads, which are a type of air plant that grow in the trees here. And and they were just like everywhere. It was like a constellation of
Wow.
like these yellow and red um, flowering air plants, like suspended from some of the trees. And they most of where they live is up in the canopy. So you
Right.
you sort of like look up and you just see all of these like brilliant colors, reds and yellows and blues, and it was a really magical experience. And there was an 11-foot alligator that
Well,
was hanging out
of
in
course
the
there
in
was.
the in the pond that was at the center of the. It was really just a magical experience through and through.
Very
Yeah,
powerful,
yeah,
right? I mean, especially to be that close to such a humongous predator,
yeah,
like, and still feel at peace
yeah,
and still feel magical and know that, like you said before, having that respect for the nature,
yeah,
and like you're respecting him and he's respecting you, and
yeah,
you're both kind of in this space together, and because there's balance and respect and spirit alive there,
yeah,
there's no uncomfortable or fear
yeah.
happening,
Just to be
like,
clear, I gave it plenty
of
of space.
course you did. Yes, we're not suggesting that you go do magical rituals on the backs of alligators.
No,
We are not capybaras. You see those
no.
videos of
Yeah,
capybaras
yeah,
riding on the back of crocodiles and alligators,
yep,
and they're like, just like, hey, what's hanging out? So that's pretty amazing. And I know that a lot of your work is really based on, connecting with nature
yeah,
and deeper connection. You say that you are an animist. And
yep,
for people who might not know what that term means that are listening,
yeah.
can you describe that term? And then can you also talk a little bit about how did you come to discover that that was part of your practice?
Sure. Um, yeah, so I used to do, as part of my day job, I used to do a lot of coding. So one of
Mm,
the in keeping with that, one of the things that I tell people is that it to me animism is the source code of the universe. It's how the universe is actually fundamentally created. Everything from the smallest atomic particle to the largest, supernova is all inspirited, and so I see everything and every part of things as being inspirited. And like a good way to describe that would be like talking about a river. I think, in my belief, rivers have spirits. They're inspirited. You can work with them. You can
yes.
um, ask them, you can create relationships, basically. But beyond that, there's a watershed that feeds the river. And I would say that there's a spirit of that watershed that includes the river, but is also beyond the river. And then beyond that, there's, the bioregional ecosystem that is all springing up and supported by that watershed, which is also its own inspirited being, if you
Right.
want.
Right.
Um, and then all of the animals and plants and rocks and everything that are within that, space are all part of that system as well. So they make up part of that entire ecosystem, but are each individually able to be worked with as well, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. It does make sense. And I like that word that you're using, inspirited.
Yeah,
Um, Oftentimes when I think of animism, I think of the phrase alive. This is
yeah,
alive, or this has a soul,
yeah,
or something of that nature. But I think inspirited is a much more well-rounded term to use for um everything, right?
yeah,
And that it is the source code of the universe
yeah,
is brilliant, because
yeah,
it is this unseen energetic divinity, if you will, that binds everything together and yet
yeah,
also allows things to be individual.
right.
Am I
Yeah,
am I
and that's
paraphrasing that
that's
correctly?
perfectly. Yeah, and I would say just to add to that, all of this is what comprises, to me, the goddess or the star goddess in, from my fairy tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we are part of, the universe, as a whole, uh, is that entity, So it's hard to be separate from the universe if you have, with an animist sort of viewpoint. But I don't think, and I think that animism is kind of having a moment right now. but I think
Mm,
animism has always sort of existed within witchcraft.
for sure.
There's never I in modern witchcraft, meaning like post, Gardner era. So I'm not like, this is brand new. I'm just like, this is how I practice, and I just want to share
Right.
it with people,
And you've been practicing for so long and you're finally like, hey, this is what I
Yeah.
do, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
I do think that people practice animism, whether they're witches or not witches. Like,
yeah,
um, in my personal practice, for me, animism looks like beyond, I mean, very not in the broad swaths that you are using it. And I feel like after reading your recent work, I'm definitely going to start applying these ideas and modalities to other things outside of my kitchen. But like, I've named all my appliances,
yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
I know
That's
sounds
a
crazy. I know it
no,
sounds
that's
crazy, but like, I'll put something in the microwave
yeah,
or I'll set a timer and it'll go off and I'll be like, okay, Mike, I hear you.
yeah,
And my partner's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, Mike's telling me that I have to do this thing. And he's like, who the fuck is Mike? I'm like, Mike,
the
microwave,
microwave.
Mike.
Yeah,
It's just Mike. Same thing. We have a Keurig machine for coffee.
yeah,
Her name is Kay. I
yeah,
don't know why it's a girl, and I don't know why her name is Kay. It just is. you know
yeah, yep,
and little things like that connect me to my
yeah,
tools.
no,
Even my home, when I come home from a trip, I walk through the house and I run my hands along the walls down we have a long hallway,
hmm
and I run my hands down the walls and I'm like, hello home, I love
yeah,
you, I'm so her name is Susie, like she's a Susie Home. I don't, again, I don't know why. It just is her
yeah,
name. And I thank her and I'm grateful for her and I take care of her. And if she has a problem, she lets me know. And it creates this sort of, caretaking,
yeah,
carer. My home is always taking care of me.
yeah,
So then it is my job to also take care of her
right,
and to animate her to understand that she is inspirited,
yeah,
uh, allows me, I think, a deeper connection with our relationship.
yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah, I
I'm
I
sorry, go
think
ahead.
the no, I'm um the the house spirit in particular is one that I have a deep relationship with. And I always sort of did, but I think it was in when I was taking Witchcraft 1 with the temple. Um in the Inner Temple book by Christopher Penzak, he talks about setting up an altar for your house spirit. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. This is like a spirit that I've been working with for so long. Why didn't I probably didn't think to create an altar to it because my wife would have been like, you really need another altar in our house?
Yes.
Yes, I do. So, but yeah, it was so ever since then I've had this altar set up to my house spirit, and I go there every morning. I greet it. Some days it really, for whatever reason, my house spirit loves bourbon. So I offer it some bourbon, not regularly, but occasionally when I'm feeling like
Mm-hmm.
let's just, keep the relations running smoothly and
Mm-hmm.
everything. It's yeah, I've tried tea, I've tried coffee, I've tried water. It likes bourbon.
Not
That's
interested.
yeah,
It's like I'm
so
housing you
right.
in Florida
Yeah,
where
yeah.
it's hot and there are
Uh-huh.
storms and I need
Yeah,
something a little stronger than tea.
right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I keep the rats out of this place. Like
Right. My
so
house loves fresh flowers, and
uh
that's difficult because we have cats that are obsessed with eating the flowers,
oh man.
where our old cats didn't give a shit about flowers, so I
Right,
could have
right.
them out all the time. So I try to get them for her and I bring them in and I put them in different spots in the house.
Yeah,
And then they'll stay for like a day. And then I'll put them out in the sunroom or I'll put them on the deck. So they're still close to the house. But
yeah,
unfortunately, I can't leave them in all the time. But I think knowing how your house feels, and there's no science to that, right? Like
yeah, right.
it's like, how do you know your house likes bourbon?
Yeah.
you just know, you
Yeah.
feel it, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the energy in the home feels different when you make that offering.
Definitely. Yeah. And there's a definite psychic connection. In developing my practice over the years, I kind of came to animism way before witchcraft. And so I would, learn how to communicate with different beings around me by opening up what I later discovered were like my psychic senses, and they tend to communicate most with me through imagery. So, if I receive images and emotions
Mm,
when I'm doing any any sort of psychic work, I don't know why. That's just the filter that exists for me.
right.
Other people, it's different. But so I get strong impressions of like, when I'm at, for example, at my house altar and it wants bourbon, I'll get a little flash of, the bottle. So,
Right.
you know, and and like I said, I don't offer it regularly, but there's once every week, once every 2 weeks, it wants a
Little
little
nip,
nip of
little
the
nip.
good stuff. Yeah.
So you said that you came to animism, you found animism before even
Yeah.
witchcraft.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about how, like you just said, like, you get feelings, you would get,
Yeah.
like a vision or something. I
Right.
imagine this started early on in
Very
life.
early. Yeah.
So can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about those early experiences and
Yeah,
how
for
you
sure.
kind of discovered that that was what it was? And then how did that lead you into witchcraft?
Yeah. Um, so I had a pretty haunted childhood, I would say. It was, the town that I grew up in was very small. Around, I think right now they have about 600 people. When I was growing up, it was closer to 1,200.
Wow.
So it's rapidly, you know, evaporating.
Was that also Florida?
No, this is in Illinois,
Okay.
Western Illinois. Very rural area. Cornfields in every direction. And my town was built on top of an abandoned coal mine. Like the reason the town existed was because of the coal mine,
Wow.
and it's just been kind of slowly disintegrating ever since the coal mine was abandoned.
Well, sure. That makes sense.
Um, but because of being on top of a coal mine, I think that there's something about that that sort of brings in more spiritual energy, whether it was from, the literally ripping out the heart of the land, or if it's from, coal miners who had accidents, or, there was a train that used to go through town. Occasionally, I would hear a train whistle late at night
Wow.
in my town, and there hasn't been a train, there's not even tracks anymore. So
Wow.
yeah, and just there, every house that I lived in had a ghost, at least
Sure.
one.
Like you said, when
Um,
you said you had a haunted childhood, I was like, oh,
yeah,
I hope he was okay. And now I'm like,
yeah,
oh no, you mean literally
literally haunted. Yeah,
haunted,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I
Growing
that
up
that
around spirits. Yeah,
that chasm that the town is built on,
right,
it's a wound, it's an earth wound.
right, for
And
sure.
your generations are going to feel that,
Yeah,
it's not healable,
yeah, for sure.
wow,
Absolutely.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think about that when I hear about like in the Appalachians where they're doing like mountaintop removal and things like that. I'm like, there must, like the wound there is so enormous. And,
Hmm.
but anyways, so I grew up in a very rural area, like I said, and but strangely, my parents weren't particularly religious. They were, when I was growing up, I would say at best agnostic. As
Mm.
they've aged, they've become more and more atheist. Um, but that was sort of a blessing for me, growing up in an area that was pretty religious, pretty Christian based,
Yeah,
Protestant.
yeah.
Lots of Swedes and Germans, and so they had some more rigid Protestant, sort of
Right.
even like trending towards Calvinist uh, tendencies.
Very hardcore. Very
Hardcore,
hardcore.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and really not into the spirit world at all. Like there's there's Jesus and nothing else. Everything
Yep.
else is evil.
Yep. For sure.
Um, so having parents that weren't like that was a real benefit for me, I think. And I used to be almost upset with my parents because I was so different from everybody
Mm,
around me.
yeah.
But not, I mean, like clearly it was a huge benefit. And it allowed me to sort of dig in and discover what spirituality meant for me and to experience it in such a raw form because it
Mm,
was uninformed
right.
for the most part. So it was, like coming up against something and having no points of relation for
Yeah. No
what I was.
framework.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
um that was a real benefit. And over time, I just sort of, because of that, I would reach out to the world around me and see what
Mm,
it felt like on a spiritual level. I sort of grew up with, my dad was very much into horror movies. So that, ties right into the haunting and just,
yeah.
uh, makes you makes you suspicious of the spirit world in some senses, but also it's like, wow, like they're making movies about these like ghosts and monsters, and like I have ghosts in my own life. Like maybe,
Right.
so it sort of opened these doors to discovery. And yeah, I started, you know, I would spend so much time in this small wooded area near my house and like began to feel getting impressions from plants, from trees, and from animals that were living in the area, and just started like exploring that deeper and deeper and deeper, um, and just recognizing that like I think animism is sort of it's something that children have inherently,
Mm,
and I think it's trained out of us
mm,
as time goes on. You have your imaginary
yes.
friend, you have your stuff. My son has stuffies, and I had, stuffed animals when I was a kid as well, and you give them personalities, or
Mm,
maybe they actually have their own personalities to begin with, and
yes.
and you're just capable of picking that up. Um,
Yes. And it's chalked up to, oh, that child has a vivid
yeah,
imagination, or oh, that little one is, oh, they're just bored, or they could keep themselves busy or whatever. But I agree with you. I think that obviously children are more in tune with the natural world. They're more in tune with spirit because they have not yet become jaded or
yeah,
too busy
right,
to see it. They're
yeah,
in touch with that part of themselves, and so it's easier for them to be in touch with that in the spirit realm as well.
yeah,
Um, so I'm sorry. You're talking about imaginary friends, and like
yeah, yeah.
I had an imaginary friend, and
No, that's great.
she was again like, did I make her up, or was she like, was she real? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
Like, yeah, I think as adults, when we get to a point in our practice where we can let go of some of our grown up hangups,
yeah,
get our minds right, do meditation, kind of free up some of that creative energy that
yeah,
allows us to, again, like you say, connect deeper, get more
yeah.
rooted in that, and realize that energetic properties. And how did you put it? You used a term earlier that was just so great.
Inspirited.
Inspirited,
Okay.
that
Yep.
the inspirited nature of other things.
Yeah.
I just think that's wonderful. So then how did the animism dovetail into you finding the witchcraft path?
I, in part, I would say it was all about the D&D. Dungeons and
Yes.
Dragons.
Yes.
I was a huge fantasy reader
You can
before
say
I
nerd.
was,
It's fine. We're
yeah,
all nerds here.
I was a
Just
total nerd.
total nerds. Yes. Good.
Um,
Yes.
yeah. So I read enormous, just everything that I could get my hands on, I read.
Yes.
And then I made friends with this kid, and his older brother was really into this game with these funny looking dice and like all of these like books, and the books had all these like crazy like imagery on them
Yes.
and in them. And I was like, wait, we can play a game where it's like you're in the book? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, let's do it.
Yes. It's
So
the
I think
gateway drug. D&D is
it
the
totally
gateway
is.
drug to
It totally
witchcraft,
is.
right?
It totally is. And every, like every like friend that I had who had a youth pastor was always like, no, D&D is evil. It's a path to the devil. And I'm like, in hindsight, they're not exactly wrong. I mean, I like the devil means a different thing to me than it does to them, but whatever.
It's D&D is the it's not the gateway to the devil as the Christians would have you think,
Right.
but it is an opening
Yeah,
to everything else,
yeah,
like questioning and creativity
absolutely.
and you know, animism and
Yeah. Yeah,
magic
and
and
growing up in such a small
possibility.
town, for me, it was like growing up in such a small town where there was such limited viewpoints, and I was like, there's got to be more to the
Yeah.
world than what I'm experiencing. And
Yeah.
then like, reading fantasy novels and playing D&D, it was like, oh, like I have skills that are valuable,
Mm,
like you said, creativity. There's math involved. There's, logic. You have to reason through puzzles and things like that. All of those skills were like, oh wait, I'm not just like, some guy, some kid who lives in a cornfield, and like there's more to the world,
right.
Um,
Right. I love that
so
so much.
yeah, that opened me up a lot. And it wasn't until I was maybe I was I think I was past my like deep playing of D&D by the time that I discovered Raymond Buckland's Bucky's Big Blue Book, you know.
Right. Right.
Um, and
And then
and
you were like,
I
oh shit, this stuff is
yeah,
real.
yeah. Oh wait, it's not just a game. I can
Right.
actually do this in real life,
Yes. Yes.
So that was my first like introduction into actual witchcraft, and I was like, this. It just felt like a continuation of something that I had been like a mission that I had been on since I
Mm,
was a little kid, and
wow.
it was really a sense of homecoming in a lot of ways. Though I did not end up, sticking with Buckland's book, and there were plenty of things about it that I'd found resonance with that
Mm,
helped propel me forward on my journey.
wow. I love that
Um,
so much.
yeah.
That's fantastic. Wow. Okay. So, Nathan, we need to take a quick break,
Okay.
hear from our amazing sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to talk about your new book, which is very
Great.
exciting. So, we'll be right back with the amazing Nathan Hall. We are back on Conversational Witchcraft with Nathan Hall, and we're talking animism and witchcraft and D&D, and it's freaking great. So let's talk about your brand new book,
Oh,
which is The Path of the Moonlit Hedge, which I know you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover. Okay. I know that's like the one thing people tell you not to do, but this book is beautiful.
yeah. I
This
really, yeah.
the cover is gorgeous, and I'm very grateful and very lucky because I get all these, you know, early releases from the
Right.
publisher, from
Right.
Llewellyn. But if I saw this in the bookstore, I would buy it without opening it up
Yeah.
because it's that beautiful. I would judge this
I
and be like, I need
I
it.
owe so much to so Llewellyn, they have their own art department.
Yeah.
So I'm not, and they don't share who their particular
Mm-hmm.
artists are. It's just made by the Llewellyn art department. I've
Yep.
even asked, and they're like, we don't really share that. And I'm like, but I owe so much to whoever that person is because
Yeah.
they like that has probably led to so many sales.
It's
I saw
it's
it and I was like, yep, that's it. You nailed
it's
it.
absolutely freaking beautiful.
Yeah.
And and it really does. Yes, the cover is beautiful, but the contents of the book are also freaking amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Um, but the cover does grab you, and
Yeah.
you can't deny it. And for me myself personally, like rabbit is my soul animal.
Yeah.
So I see the hair and I'm like, I don't care what it is,
Yeah.
I'm gonna buy
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So I just think this it's a really, really great book. So tell us about, why did you write this book and why now? Like,
Yeah.
why is this your project now? And what's so important for you in writing this book?
So I think the thing that drove me to wrote it was that, as I was saying before, I don't think that animism is rare to
Mm,
find or hard to find in witchcraft, but I wasn't finding the thing where it was centered in the way that animism is centered in my personal life. And I don't even like I just, and that's not to give short shrift to anybody who's written about animism in their own books and who have inspired me, but it was never, to me it's the core of my practice,
mhm,
and I relate to the world even beyond witchcraft through animism. And I just wanted, I wanted to find that book that I was not finding.
mhm,
And that's why I decided to write it. It had been sort of bubbling beneath the surface for years and years, but I couldn't quite, because I was finding elements of animism within all the different books that I was reading. And I never could quite put a pin on what it was that I was missing or what I was looking for, until I realized, oh, it just needs to be in the center of the book. It just needs to be like, okay, this is animism and this is witchcraft on top of it. Like,
mm,
let's go. Um, so I just wanted something where there was a deep connection between and interplay and exchange between animism and witchcraft. I think witchcraft tends to be a lot of things to a lot of different people.
mm,
Um, and for me, I was just looking for that thing where it was like, here they are together. The two things that are the most important to me are witchcraft and animism, and they're partnered in a way that's central.
right. And I think you've nailed that. And I think that
Thank you.
as we said earlier, like so many people already are practicing animism. They're already doing it.
Yeah,
Maybe they don't even know,
right.
uh, you know, little
Yeah, I mean,
things like, I don't know, like I've named all the wildlife creatures in my backyard and I get
yeah,
excited when they come to visit and you know, put out treats for them or
yeah,
whatever, people do that sort of thing without realizing it.
yeah,
And I think it is witchcraft,
yeah,
and it lies within
yeah,
witchcraft.
yeah.
I don't
I think,
necessarily think they are separate. I think people do it anyway and
yeah,
don't realize that they're.
yeah, yeah. I totally agree. I think the thing that started making me feel like something was being missed was when I
Mm,
was seeing people coming in who were just like, okay, I need a table of correspondences, and then I'm just gonna like put together this little spell, and then boom,
mm-hmm,
I get what I want. And I
mm-hmm,
was like, my magic is not a wish granting machine.
mm-hmm.
I have to work
Say
hard for
that
it.
again. Magic is not a wish granting machine. It
Yeah,
requires a lot of visualization, a lot of hard work, a
yeah,
lot of clear intention.
yeah. And speaking of, I mean, the correspondences, like for me, the correspondences are like I want to develop a relationship with the spirit of the
Mm-hmm,
plants, of the stones, crystals, gems, of the oils and waters and washes and everything. I need to develop a relationship with them because I don't want to be in a user-based relationship with them where I'm using them. I want us to be partnered together so that we're working together towards a goal. And whether that is a goal that both of us have, or it's a goal that I have, and then in return, I'm offering something to them, um, we work that out. But yeah, it was really troubling to me to see a lot of people coming into witchcraft where they were just like, I just need, whatever, galangal root or, or
Mm-hmm.
yarrow or whatever. And it was like, well, what is that adding to the spell for you? Well, it
Mm-hmm.
has this correspondence. Well, do you know that it has that? I mean, like,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the correspondence tables and books of correspondences and everything are pretty accurate, but
Mm-hmm.
at the same point, I feel like it's important to dig a little more deeply and work with this. I always tell people, I have a small, I live in a small house. I have a small garden outside, just in raised beds, and I cultivate different herbs and different plants, and I work with them, closely. And in a lot of cases, I've been able to figure out, okay, well, this spell that has this correspondent, this plant that has this correspondence to be used in this spell for whatever, wealth, generating more income for myself or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Oftentimes I've found that with the plants that I'm personally cultivating or that I work with in my local environment, I can find what I need. I don't need to go out and, I've spent so much money with companies, great companies like Mountain Rose Herbs and things like that. And I love them. I love what they offer and what they the access that they give people.
Mm-hmm.
But in the, over the years, I've been like, well, maybe I can just, start working with the spirits around me. And it's really, I feel like it's really been successful, to a
I,
to a
I
large degree.
I think that's amazing. And I want to go back to something that you just
Hmm.
said about working with these things and creating a
Yeah,
partnership with your stones or your herbs or the world around you and creating a partnership and not that wish granting idea.
yeah, yeah,
I think this is a really important point in any kind of witchcraft that you're doing, any kind of energy work that you're doing, especially when you're working with things that are inspirited as everything is,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
If you had a friend, and I'm saying this just in general, right?
yeah,
If you had a friend and that friend only ever called you when they needed something, they only ever showed up when you could do something for them, eventually you wouldn't take that call anymore. You would
absolutely.
feel taken advantage of. You would be
Yeah,
like, well, I want to give to you and I want to be there for you, but everything in balance and love and friendship and support is reciprocal,
right.
not necessarily in the same, you don't necessarily have to give the same kind of support, but what does that friend need, how can I help them,
Yeah,
and not to give to that friend when you need something. Oh,
right.
well, I'm going to call you and take you out to lunch because I really want you to do me this favor.
Yeah, yeah,
That's not how we treat people, and that's not how we should treat our magical partners,
right.
right? So to be able to, as you said, you're growing your herbs and you're growing your plants. I am not a great grower, so
Yeah,
I kitchen witch, not a garden witch.
yeah,
So I'm very, very particular about the herbs that I grow, and they're really just culinary. And how
yeah,
do I show them love? Well,
yeah,
I'm going to plant them in really beautiful soil, and I'm going to talk to them,
yeah,
and I'm going to give them, my energy, and I'm going to tend them, and I'm going to give them fresh water, and I'm going to give them food. And sometimes I put little stones in them in the little
yeah,
pots, and
right.
you know I do these things for them all the time,
Yeah,
right? So then when I need them, they're willing to give me that energy back,
yeah, yeah,
because I'm not doing it because I need them. I'm doing
right.
it whether or not I need them.
Yeah,
And that is how we need to feel and treat our magical partners. Would you
definitely.
agree?
Yeah, for sure. I would say one caveat. I don't think that you actually have to be able to cultivate any sort of plants or herbs or anything.
Thank you.
Um, I think the spirits are there to work with,
Yes.
and they're there. and you can figure out ways to work with them. You can set up little altars
Mm-hmm.
or just make occasional offerings, to the spirit. Sometimes I'll do, little bags, the little felt bags or whatever that you get from
Mm-hmm.
New Age stores. And I'll pack them with, um, dried herbs of one variety or another that I can't grow or that don't grow well for
Mm-hmm.
me here. Um, and then I'll offer it like, water. Most of my offerings tend to be water,
Mm-hmm.
just because I don't know why I got on that, but my I think to me it was just like the most energetically pure or clean offering that I could give,
Mm-hmm.
where it kind of like working with quartz, it's a similar vibe of like just this pure, clean energy that works well in offerings.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I think so. I would not worry about whether or not you're good at growing plants or not.
Well, I'm
Is what
trying
it.
to make the point of like you said, like you can
Yeah.
make offerings
Yes.
not just when you need something, not just when you want a wish granted, right?
Right.
Like as the day that we're recording this, even though this isn't going to air until the fall, we're recording this on the summer solstice.
Yeah.
So because it's the summer solstice, I am going to make offerings today, little things. I'm going to do bird seed and maybe some honey, and I'm going to go out into my yard and I'm going to put things out there for nature, for my
Yeah.
birds, for
Yeah.
my nature friends. Like I'm going to do that because that's how I'm going to celebrate the solstice today. It took me
Yeah.
5 minutes. I'm going to do it with intention and it's
Yeah.
important. And I'm doing it because I love my land and I
Yeah.
love my creatures and I
Yeah.
love, the space and where we live.
Yeah.
And so it with no expectation of reciprocity,
Right.
right? I'm
I
just
think
treating my friends good today because it's a holiday.
right.
Right? Like that's what
Yeah.
you do. It's your birthday, it's Christmas.
Yeah.
We're just going to do nice things for our friends because that's what we do.
Yeah.
And to look at our allies, our magical allies, our nature allies as our friends, as our partners, as you so
Yeah.
wonderfully put it, that's how we treat them,
Yeah.
even if we can't grow things.
Right. And one of the things that I think gets very frequently overlooked in witchcraft in terms of offerings is conversation, uh,
Mm,
talking with, whether that's verbally or psychically, with the spirits that you're allied with any of the beings that you encounter. Listening and conversing, I think, are hugely important. Um, I mean, think about like if you have a neighbor and the neighbor brings you banana bread all the time. You love that neighbor. That's awesome. But, they don't talk to you. So you're like,
why
what's
do they keep
going
bringing
on
me?
with this?
Right,
Yeah.
right, right.
So, that's, part of establishing that, good relations with your neighbors or whatever is sure you might bring, some banana bread over, but also you have a little conversation. Oh, how's your life? What's up with is I saw you had a problem with your car last week. Is that
Mm-hmm.
resolved? Did it get fixed or what, just
Mm-hmm. You look
chit-chatting.
beautiful today. The flowers in your
Yeah.
garden look
Yeah.
gorgeous. Oh, look at your shiny leaves, or, oh wow, your
Yeah.
your buds are growing beautifully. Like
Yeah.
having seeing,
Yeah.
acknowledging.
Yeah.
Again, think of how you feel as a person when someone sees you,
Yeah. When
recognizes
you
you,
when you feel
appreciates
seen.
you,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Definitely.
That's how our
Yeah.
magical partners feel when we give them that attention.
Yeah, for sure. Right
Oh,
now
I
I'm
love
I'm
that so
going through
much.
this thing where so every summer I grow like mugwort, I grow
Hmm.
rue, and in some areas in Florida, and with the right conditions and garden, I might be able to make them last throughout the summer.
Hmm.
But my particular area my microclimate is so humid
Hmm.
and so rainy that it tends I get a lot of mildew or like mold that grows. It's like a downy mildew that grows on plants
Hmm.
when they're not allowed to dry during the day. So I have like mugwort and rue that are like, and even mint,
Mm.
that are like they just die. They can't handle it and they just succumb to too much moisture in the air. So, I'm talking to them now and I'm saying, listen, I want to take a cutting from you and root that cutting and grow that cutting inside so that you can live on beyond the summer. And then I'll transplant that cutting, you know, in the fall when the rainy season ends,
Right.
towards the end of the fall. Um, and I find just that simple communication just makes everything flow so much easier. And the rootings, the cuttings root very well. They respond well because I've communicated what I'm doing. I'm not just coming and cutting. I have this one of my great successes right now is this rosemary plant that I've
Oh.
been working with for a couple years. And in Florida, rosemary, given the right conditions, you can keep it around, but
Mm.
it has a tendency to succumb to the heat, humidity, and overwatering. They don't like wet feet. And
Hmm.
a lot of the soil here is just constantly,
Hmm.
if it's not just sand, even the sand is constantly saturated,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've had this like really successful relationship with this rosemary plant, and to the point that I have this really large, it's sort of like a rotating garden, like uh, it's hard to describe. And it has filled the entire thing. So its
Wow.
roots stretch about, 4 feet down or 3.5 feet down.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, we've had such great success, uh, and you found a spot that you really love. So I'm going to do everything I can. And I used to grow all kinds of vegetables and salad greens and stuff like that in this. It's a tower garden.
And now
Um,
it's just hers. She's like,
and now it's
no,
just
this
hers.
is this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
mine.
It's
This is
it's
mine.
Yeah.
I
And
love
there's a
it.
couple little plants that grow here and there in it, but for the most part, I'm like, I don't want to mess up a good thing. We've got a good thing
Right.
going. It's yours.
It's a great relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
Nathan, you're just simply delightful. And your
Oh,
book,
thank you.
Path of the Moonlit Hedge, is really gorgeous. And it's available now through Llewellyn.
Yep,
Tell everyone where they can find this book, where they can buy this book, and how they can follow you
sure.
online and where you're going to be next teaching classes.
Okay. So my book is available wherever you can find books. If you have a store, metaphysical or occult store nearby, order from them. Let's keep them in business.
Yes.
Um, But otherwise, you can find it at Amazon, Barnes and Noble. IndieBound is another great
So great.
website.
Yep.
Um, I'm at moonlithedge.com, and my Instagram is at moonlithedge. Um, I'm on Facebook, uh, and you can find my author profile there. It's either you can just search for Nathan M. Hall. Um, yeah, so that's where to find me. And then I'll be after when this airs, I'll be heading into Massachusetts to teach um, at Temple Fest with the
So
Temple of
exciting.
Witchcraft. Yeah, I'm
So
very
exciting.
excited about that.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I've bookended that trip with Salem visits on both sides. So
Yeah. Yeah. So we're gonna put all of your links and everything up on the show notes so people can
great.
find you. Path of the Moonlit Hedge by Nathan Hall, Nathan M. Hall
Yeah,
through Llewellyn Worldwide is just it's out now and it's really, really wonderful. Nathan, before I let you go, I've got to ask you my signature question, which is
sure.
nothing has nothing to do with anything we've talked about. I ask it to everyone that comes on the show. If you could have me as a kitchen witch make you one magical meal, what would it be and why?
It would be. Uh, I would love lasagna. Lasagna is
Lasagna.
is a heart food for me. It's got everything. Um it's like pizza, but with pasta, and and you can go to sleep after you eat it. So
And sometimes in it, because it's like
yeah, yeah.
blankets of noodles
Right,
and
right.
cheese and just you roll right up in it. I
Yeah,
get asked for, like, when I ask this question to people, more often than not, I would say like 40% of the time people ask for something Italian,
yeah.
because they're like, oh, she's gonna make some good ass lasagna. And it's
Yeah.
true, I do make a good ass lasagna. Do you want meat lasagna or do you want vegetable lasagna?
You know, I used to I was a vegetarian for like 10 years. But I've come back to the meaty side of the force,
Mm-hmm.
and so it would be a meat. It would, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah,
for
I,
sure.
I I would say that would you look like the kind of guy that would really like a hearty meat lasagna
Yeah,
with
yeah.
lots of cheese and fresh
Oh yeah.
tomato sauce and
Yep.
fresh out of the oven, still bubbling with a slice
Love
of
it.
garlic bread on the
Sounds
side.
great. Sounds great.
Getting hungry now.
Yeah, me
Nathan,
too.
thank you so much for joining us on
Thank
Conversational
you.
Witchcraft. It's been wonderful to chat with you, talking about animism and witchcraft and everything. Thank you so, so much for being
Thank
here.
you. Thank you. It was my pleasure.
So wonderful. And until next time, everyone, I wish you so many blessings and much, much gratitude.